The Collins family mansion, standing in Boston's upscale Beacon Hill neighborhood, took on a bluish-white glow as the winter sun set. Old ivy twined around the white exterior walls, quietly telling the story of changing seasons. The lives of the sisters raised in this house were as contrasting as the four seasons. Elizabeth Collins sat at her desk in the examination room, filling out the chart for her last patient. Her fingers, bearing the experience of over a decade as a physician, smoothly covered the paper with small handwriting. As chief physician at the Boston Children's Medical Center, she had established a secure position for herself. "Good work today, doctor." "That's all the appointments for today," said Nurse Margaret with a slight bow as she left the examination room. Elizabeth smiled back and leaned against the chair's backrest. As she closed her eyes briefly, her hands naturally came to rest on her growing belly. 6 months pregnant. This was her long-awaited first child. Her cell phone rang, and her mother Vivian's name appeared on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, Elizabeth answered. "Mom, what is it?" "Elizabeth, you're coming to dinner tomorrow, right? We're going to discuss plans for Melanie's engagement party." Vivian's voice sounded excited. "Yes, I'm planning to come. But I might be a little late. I have a prenatal checkup tomorrow." A faint sigh could be heard from the other end of the line. "You're always so busy. Can't you be a bit more cooperative during this important time for Melanie?" At her mother's words, Elizabeth felt something tighten deep in her chest. Even when she had graduated from medical school and worked overnight shifts as a resident, her mother's interest had always been directed at Melanie's career as a fashion model. Her mother proudly showed off Melanie's magazine covers to her friends, but never once asked about the papers Elizabeth had published in medical journals. "All right, Mom. I'll come right after my checkup." After hanging up, Elizabeth exhaled deeply.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
Once again, she was reminded that her pregnancy was less important than her sister's engagement. Melanie's fiancé, Jason Winston, was the heir to New England's largest real estate development company. This marriage would further elevate her mother's position in society. Before leaving the examination room, Elizabeth picked up her cell phone again. She sent a message to her husband Michael, who was stationed overseas. "My checkup is at 3 p.m. tomorrow. I wish you were here with me." His reply came a few minutes later. "I wish that too. But this medical mission will be over in 2 weeks. Let me know how the baby is doing. Love you." Michael was serving as a military doctor providing medical support in the Middle East. They had met when Elizabeth was working with Doctors Without Borders. They deeply understood each other as comrades who approached medicine with a shared sense of mission. While he was away, Elizabeth had been experiencing pregnancy alone. In the car on the way home, Elizabeth called her friend Carol. "Preparations for Melanie's engagement party have begun. Mom seems completely focused on that," she said. Carol's voice was tinged with worry. "Are you okay? Didn't the doctor tell you to rest?" "I'm fine. Just a little tired," Elizabeth put on a brave face. In reality, she was showing signs of pregnancy-induced hypertension, and her doctor had advised her to avoid stress and get plenty of rest. "Liz, you always push yourself too hard. You should put yourself and the baby first." Elizabeth gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I know. But what? You don't want to disturb family harmony. Are they concerned about your health?" "It's not that simple," Elizabeth answered quietly. After hanging up, Elizabeth parked in her driveway. Looking at the living room light through the window, she stood still for a moment. The absence of her husband in this house suddenly felt lonely. The next evening, when Elizabeth arrived at her mother's house, party planners and catering staff were already bustling about. As soon as she entered, she could hear Melanie's bright laughter. "Elizabeth!" Melanie exclaimed when she spotted her sister, holding up a sparkling large diamond ring. "Look! A present from Jason. Isn't it gorgeous?" "It really is beautiful," Elizabeth smiled. She wanted to genuinely be happy for her sister. But at the same time, an indescribable loneliness spread within her. "Elizabeth, you finally made it," her mother Vivian appeared and kissed her daughter on the cheek. "I want you to check the invitation list. Of course, considering your condition, I've kept it to simple tasks." Elizabeth just nodded quietly and did as her mother said. While sitting at the table looking over the invitation list, she felt the baby move. "It's okay," she whispered in her heart. "No matter what Mom and Melanie are like, you and I have a strong bond." One morning, a week before Melanie's engagement party, Elizabeth stopped by her parents' home on her way back from the hospital. When she opened the front door, she could hear her mother's voice and the conversation of several women coming from the living room. "Yes, he's the only son of the Winston family, which goes back 5 generations. We're planning to hold the ceremony at St. James Church." Her mother's voice was more proud than Elizabeth had ever heard before. When Elizabeth stepped into the living room, Vivian and her friends were gathered around a large table with wedding magazines spread out. "Oh, Elizabeth," her mother looked up. "Perfect timing. Help us address the invitations. You have such nice handwriting." Elizabeth managed a tired smile. "Hello, everyone." Her mother's friends nodded to her before quickly returning to the topic of the engagement party. As Elizabeth sat down, placing a hand on her growing belly, one of the women finally seemed to notice and asked, "Elizabeth, when is your due date again?" "In about 3 months, she answered politely. "So, just before Melanie's wedding," Vivian interjected. "We'll be busy with party and ceremony preparations, so make sure you can return to help right after giving birth." Elizabeth nodded silently. It pained her to think that for her mother, her pregnancy and childbirth were merely obstacles interfering with her sister's wedding preparations. That night, Elizabeth held back tears as she explained the situation to her husband during a video call. "Liz, don't push yourself," Michael's face showed deep concern. "Didn't the doctor tell you to rest?" "I know. But Mom is so focused on Melanie that she doesn't even." Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry I can't be there with you." Michael reached out his hand toward the screen, as if he could touch her. "My mission will be over soon. Just hang in there until then." After ending the call, Elizabeth lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. As a physician, she knew her body was showing dangerous signs. Rising blood pressure, worsening swelling, and occasional severe headaches. All were evidence that her pregnancy-induced hypertension was worsening. At her appointment the next day, Dr. Sarah Johnson looked at Elizabeth sternly. "As a doctor yourself, you should understand how dangerous this condition is," she pointed to Elizabeth's test results. "Protein is starting to appear in your urine. This could progress to preeclampsia if left unchecked. You need complete bed rest." Elizabeth sighed deeply. "I know. But what?" Dr. Johnson's eyes were sharp. "Your life and your baby's life are at risk. We might need to consider hospitalization immediately." In the end, Elizabeth avoided hospitalization on the condition of strict home rest. However, she headed straight to her mother's house afterward. 3 days until Melanie's engagement party. Preparations were almost complete, but her mother had been calling daily with detailed instructions. "Mom, I need to talk to you," Elizabeth called out to her mother, who was giving cooking instructions in the kitchen. "What is it? Please be brief." "The florist will be here soon. The doctor has ordered complete bed rest. Could I be excused from attending the party?" Her mother stopped moving. Vivian slowly turned around and stared at her daughter. Her eyes reflected a mixture of surprise and anger. "Excuse me? Are you joking?" "I'm not joking, Mom. The baby is in danger." "You always do this," her mother's voice was cold. You always try to steal Melanie's spotlight. Elizabeth gasped. That's not my intention. I just what? Melanie entered the room. She looked accusingly at her sister while flashing her engagement ring. Another health issue. Don't ruin my special day. Melanie, I really am unwell, Elizabeth tried desperately to explain. The doctor. Doctor, Melanie interrupted. You always use your position as a doctor to try to get special treatment. Elizabeth was hurt by her sister's words. She had become a doctor out of a genuine desire to help people, not to seek privilege. Yet in front of her family, her dedication and success seemed worthless. Fine, Elizabeth said resignedly. I'll be at the party. That night, she decided to stay in the guest room at her parents' house. The countdown to the end of Michael's mission was now 5 days. She lay on the bed and spoke to her baby. Just a little longer. Daddy will be home soon. Until then, let's stay strong together. But her body was screaming in protest. When she woke in the middle of the night, she was struck by severe headaches and nausea. The swelling in her ankles had worsened. When pressed with a finger, the indentation remained. As a doctor, Elizabeth fully understood what these symptoms meant. Yet, for her family and to maintain family harmony, she chose to continue enduring. The day before the party, Elizabeth was in the kitchen following her mother's instructions, doing a final check on the hors d'oeuvres. Suddenly, a sharp abdominal pain struck, and she gasped. What's wrong? Her mother asked. Nothing, Elizabeth tried to smile, but her face contorted. Just a little tired. Her mother frowned. Early start tomorrow. The makeup artist will arrive at 7, so be ready. Elizabeth just nodded. Back in the guest room, she laid her heavy body down. Moonlight streaming through the window illuminated her pale face. Tears silently rolled down her cheeks. Just you and me, she whispered, placing her hand on her belly. Even if no one else cares about us, I'll protect you. She was afraid of what tomorrow might bring. She had a premonition that something would happen. But she no longer had a choice. For her family, she had to endure until the end. The morning of the engagement party began with cloudy skies. Upon waking, Elizabeth stared at the gray clouds outside her window. Her physical discomfort had not improved overnight. If anything, it felt worse. A dull pain throbbed at the back of her head, and the swelling in her hands and feet was more severe than the night before. The clock showed 6:30 in the morning. As her mother had said, the makeup artist would arrive at 7. Elizabeth raised her heavy body and slowly got out of bed. The moment she stood up, everything went dark before her eyes, and she had to brace herself against the wall for support. I'll be fine, she murmured as if trying to convince herself. Just one more day. After this is over, I can rest. After showering and changing into her underwear, the first pain struck. It pierced Elizabeth's abdomen with a sharpness she had never experienced before. She gasped and grabbed the sink. The pain continued for several seconds, then gradually subsided. This is. She touched her stomach with trembling hands. As a doctor, she understood what this sensation meant. It was the beginning of labor. But it was still 3 months before her due date. Far too early. Elizabeth took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. If it was just one pain, it might be false labor. She slowly put on her dress and fixed her hair. When she went downstairs, the house was already bustling with activity. Delivery personnel were bringing in flower arrangements, and catering staff were busy with preparations in the kitchen. In the living room, Vivian was checking final arrangements with the florist. Good morning, Elizabeth. As soon as her mother saw her daughter, she frowned. Still not done with makeup. The makeup artist is about to arrive. Good morning, Mom, Elizabeth tried to smile, but her face twisted. I'll get ready soon. As she tried to cross the living room, the pain struck again. This time it was stronger and lasted longer. Elizabeth instinctively grabbed the back of a sofa and held her breath. "What's wrong?" Vivian asked. There was irritation in her voice. "Mom." Elizabeth's voice was trembling. Cold sweat dripped from her forehead, and her face was contorted with pain. "Please. I'm having contractions." Her mother's expression froze. She was already dressed in an elegant champagne gold dress for the party, with her hair perfectly styled. Her appearance was in stark contrast to her suffering daughter. "What did you say?" Vivian lowered her voice so the florist wouldn't hear. "Today? Are you joking?" "It really hurts." Elizabeth clung to the sofa, shaking. "I need to go to the hospital." Vivian looked at her watch. Then she told the florist, "Please wait a moment," and took her daughter's arm, leading her to the kitchen. "Elizabeth, listen." Her mother's voice was cold. "Today is Melanie's special day. Important guests will be arriving soon. Are you planning to ruin it all with your drama?" "Mom, this isn't drama." Tears welled up in Elizabeth's eyes. "It really hurts. I might be in premature labor." "Why do you always try to steal the spotlight?" Vivian sighed. "Sorry, but today is your sister's party. Call an Uber." Elizabeth gasped. Her mother's words hit her heart directly. "An Uber? You're telling me to go to the hospital alone?" "We have 300 guests coming today." Vivian looked apologetic, but her eyes remained cold. "We can't drop everything for you." At that moment, Melanie appeared. She was wearing a pure white dress, her blonde hair glamorously styled. "What's going on?" She noticed the tense atmosphere between the two. "Liz, you don't look well." "Melanie." Elizabeth spoke during a brief lull in the pain. "The baby. I think I'm in labor." Melanie's eyes widened. "Now? You've got to be kidding." She showed the same reaction as her mother. "I'm not kidding." Elizabeth's voice was weak. "I need help." Melanie stared at her sister for a moment. Then her expression changed. From confusion to irritation, and then to indifference. "I'm the star today. Read the room," she said with a laugh, though her voice carried a hint of sarcasm. "Don't ruin our special day with your drama." Melanie raised her hand to show off her engagement ring, then began fixing her hair in the mirror. Even seeing Elizabeth's face contort with pain didn't faze her at all. "Melanie." Elizabeth looked at her sister in disbelief. "The baby is in danger." "You're always like this," Melanie sighed. "Always trying to direct everyone's attention to yourself. Especially on the day when I'm supposed to be the center of attention, you go and..." Another intense pain struck Elizabeth. She stifled a cry and clung to the kitchen counter. She felt something wet at her feet. Looking down, she saw clear fluid spreading on the floor. Her water had broken. "Mom, my water broke." Elizabeth's voice trembled with fear. Vivian and Melanie exchanged glances. Their expressions showed panic, confusion, and obvious irritation. "Elizabeth, calm down." Vivian placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, but her eyes remained cold. "I'll call an Uber. That's the best solution." "We need to go greet the guests," Melanie added. "Jason's parents will be arriving soon. We need to welcome them at the entrance." Elizabeth could only stare. The reality that her mother and sister were prioritizing a party over her and her baby's critical situation crushed her heart. "All right," she weakly replied. "Go. I'll be fine." Vivian kissed her daughter's cheek. "That's my smart girl. I'll contact the hospital later." "Aren't you going to put on makeup?" Melanie looked at her sister's face and asked. "The makeup artist is already here." Elizabeth just closed her eyes. She couldn't find words. "Let's go." Melanie, Vivian took her daughter's arm. Let's welcome the Winstons at the entrance. The two left the kitchen in their glamorous dresses, leaving Elizabeth in too much pain to move. After the door closed and the house became quiet, Elizabeth collapsed to the floor. Curled up on the cold tile floor, she cradled her belly with both hands. The pain was getting more intense, and the intervals shorter. Too rapid for a first delivery. As a doctor, Elizabeth knew this was a dangerous sign. Help! She whispered to the empty space. With great effort, she took out her cell phone and stared at the screen. Should she call her husband Michael? But there was zero chance he could return immediately from his mission in the Middle East. Carol? But she was out of state today for her sister's wedding. Elizabeth's eyes caught a name in her phone book. Martha Johnson. The kind elderly woman who lived next door. She wasn't her mother's friend, but had always been warm to Elizabeth. With trembling fingers, she dialed Martha's number. Hello, Aunt Martha. Elizabeth's voice was hoarse. Help me, the baby is. With those words, she lost consciousness. The phone slipped from her hand and rolled onto the floor. Martha's worried voice could be heard from the receiver. Elizabeth? Elizabeth? Are you okay? I'm coming right away. Through the kitchen window, Vivian and Melanie could be seen elegantly welcoming guests arriving in luxury cars. Their smiles were radiant. Meanwhile, inside the house, a mother was in mortal danger. Unnoticed, unhelped, just struggling to keep the flame of life burning for herself and her baby on the cold floor. The sound of sirens broke the silence of the residential area. Martha Johnson looked out the window of her home and confirmed that an ambulance had stopped at the Collins front door. She hurried outside to meet the paramedics. Over here, quickly, she said in a trembling voice. In the kitchen. She lost consciousness while we were talking on the phone. When the paramedics entered the house with a stretcher, they found Elizabeth lying on the kitchen floor. Her face was pale, and red blood stains were spreading beneath her dress. She's pregnant and said her contractions had started, Martha explained to the team. But it's not her due date yet. A female paramedic checked Elizabeth's pulse and immediately gave instructions to her colleague. Blood pressure dangerously high. The fetus is also at risk. We need to transport her immediately. They moved Elizabeth onto the stretcher and attached an oxygen mask. Martha held her cold fingers with trembling hands. It's okay, Elizabeth. You and the baby will be fine, she said, but fear showed in her eyes. Should we contact her family? A male paramedic asked. Martha hesitated for a moment. Her mother and sister are hosting an engagement party at another location. The paramedic's eyebrows rose. An engagement party. They went to an engagement party seeing her condition. Martha nodded silently. Anger flashed briefly across the paramedic's face before he returned to his professional demeanor. I understand. Please contact the hospital then. I'll come with you, Martha said with determination. She needs family right now. The emergency room at Memorial Hospital became active as soon as Elizabeth arrived. The doctors quickly assessed her condition and immediately began preparing for surgery. She's having eclamptic seizures. The baby is also at risk, Dr. Robinson, the obstetrician, made his diagnosis. We'll perform an emergency C-section. Martha waited in the hospital hallway. She took out her cell phone and, after some hesitation, searched for Michael's number. Fortunately, Elizabeth's smartphone remained unlocked. Hello, Mr. Michael, Martha said in a trembling voice. I'm Martha, Elizabeth's neighbor. I'm at Memorial Hospital right now. Elizabeth is. On the other end of the line, Michael's voice hardened. What happened? Are she and the baby okay? They're performing an emergency C-section. Her condition is critical, Martha decided to tell the truth. Please come back as soon as you can. I'll make arrangements immediately. Michael's voice was filled with determination. Thank you for being with my wife and baby. What about her mother and sister? Martha stumbled over her words for a moment. They seem to have other plans. A heavy silence fell on the other end of the line. I see. Michael's voice turned cold. In the operating room, doctors were fighting to save Elizabeth and her baby's lives. Due to heavy bleeding, her condition was deteriorating by the minute. Blood pressure dropping, a nurse reported. Rush the blood transfusion, Dr. Robinson calmly gave instructions. The baby first. A few minutes later, the faint cry of a little girl echoed in the operating room. She's alive. To the NICU, the doctor handed the baby to a nurse. How's the mother? Still critical. The bleeding won't stop. The surgery continued for another 2 hours. Elizabeth experienced cardiac arrest once but was revived by the medical team's quick response. By the time she was moved to intensive care, it was already past 10 at night. Deborah Clark, the hospital's social worker, listened to Martha's account of the situation and wore a deeply concerned expression. So her mother and sister went to a party knowing she was in labor, she asked. Martha nodded quietly. Elizabeth seems to have been in a dangerous condition previously. I heard she had been told by her doctor to rest. Deborah stood up as if she had made a decision. This could constitute intentional child neglect and endangerment. I have a duty to report this to the police. She contacted the police and submitted Martha's testimony and hospital records as evidence. As dawn broke, Elizabeth began to regain consciousness. Her first words were, "Baby." The nurse reassured her. "It's a girl. She's small but doing well." A weak smile appeared on Elizabeth's face. Hope, her name is Hope. That afternoon, Vivian and Melanie appeared in the hospital hallway. Though they weren't wearing their glamorous dresses, their makeup and hairstyles were still perfectly done. Their expressions showed more irritation than concern. I can't believe it, Vivian whispered to Melanie in the hallway. The party was such a success, and then at this timing. It's really the worst, Melanie agreed. Just when Jason's father was about to give his speech, we get a call from the hospital. They were guided by a nurse to Elizabeth's room. When they opened the door, they found Elizabeth lying weakly in bed and 2 police officers standing beside her. The police officers turned and looked at Vivian and Melanie. Vivian Collins and Melanie Collins? The male officer asked. Yes, that's us, but what's this about? Vivian answered with a confused expression. You are under arrest for intentional child neglect and endangerment, the officer calmly announced. Anything you say may be used as evidence against you. The color drained from their faces, and they screamed on the spot. What? Are you joking? Vivian's voice trembled. What did we do? Melanie glared at the officer. You are suspected of abandoning a severely ill pregnant patient without proper medical care, putting her life at risk, the female officer explained. Both mother and child were in mortal danger. But, Vivian stammered. She could have called an Uber, we had a party that. Be quiet, the male officer said. You'll be coming with us to the station. At that moment, hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway. Michael, back from his mission, rushed into the room. His eyes first went to his wife, then to the officers, and finally rested on Vivian and Melanie. Why? His voice was low and trembling with anger. Why did you leave her alone? Michael, listen, Vivian tried to explain. We didn't know. We didn't realize the situation was so serious. Don't lie. Michael raised his voice. I heard everything from Martha. You abandoned her when she was suffering from labor pains. The officers quietly led the 2 out. As they left, Vivian and Melanie tried to continue making excuses, but no one listened. Michael approached Elizabeth's bed and took her hand. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you, his voice was gentle. Elizabeth smiled weakly. You came back. That's what matters. The baby? She's in the NICU. But she's strong. Our daughter is. Hope, Michael nodded. I heard from the nurse. A perfect name. Elizabeth looked into her husband's eyes. They are no longer my family, she said quietly. It was a declaration and the beginning of a new chapter in her life. A year later, in spring, colorful balloons danced in the garden of a small house in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Under the blue sky, a party was being held to celebrate Hope Collins' first birthday. Elizabeth stood on the spacious deck, smiling as she looked at the gathered people. Michael had retired from the military and started working at a local hospital. He was operating the barbecue grill in a corner of the garden, chatting with guests with a smile. The cake is ready, Aunt Martha called from the kitchen. She had decided to move and now lived just 2 blocks away from Elizabeth's new home. Considering where we were a year ago, today feels like a miracle. Elizabeth nodded. Many things had changed since that day. Vivian and Melanie were found guilty in court and ordered to perform community service and pay substantial compensation. Melanie's fiancé Jason broke off the engagement as soon as he learned the details of the incident. At a press conference, he declared he was disillusioned with humanity, which was reported in local news. The social reputation of her mother and Melanie plummeted. Former friends avoided them, and Melanie faced difficulty finding employment. They had sent numerous letters of apology, but Elizabeth didn't respond. Don't you want to reconcile? Carol asked one day, and Elizabeth quietly answered, forgiveness and continuing a relationship are different things. I want them to face the consequences of their choices. Hope, come here, Deborah called. The former hospital social worker had now become one of Elizabeth's closest friends. It's cake time. When Michael lifted Hope, she showed an adorable smile. Her big blue eyes and healthy cheek color were unimaginable considering her critical birth. Everyone gathered around, Elizabeth clapped her hands. Around the table gathered her chosen family. Martha, Carol, Deborah, and colleagues all wore warm smiles. A single candle was lit and placed before Hope. Make a wish, Elizabeth whispered to her daughter. She doesn't understand the meaning of words yet, Michael said with a laugh. But our wish has come true, Elizabeth looked at her husband. A real family isn't about blood ties, but about the people who are there for you when you need them most. Hope will grow up knowing this truth. She lifted her daughter and helped her blow a small breath. The candle flame went out, and cheers erupted. Tears glistened in Elizabeth's eyes. They weren't tears of sadness, but tears of joy for a new beginning. As Hope's laughter echoed through the garden, Elizabeth was certain. A bright future filled with love and respect lay ahead for her and her daughter.